first two that I'm going to tell you about are the first two that I met.
Right.
It was Bob Kelly, the original Bob Kelly, Bob DeBardelaben, and Hugh Holder, the general manager of the station, or as I called him, the Silver Fox with a voice like God. Charlie Brown and I were doing Sunday afternoon at the mighty 1480 in Durham, WSSB, and it had a signal that was, I don't know, it would go out at least a half a mile from the transmitter. And we were doing Sunday afternoons. We didn't even know each other, but we learned that we both were Carolina students. He was a year ahead of me. He was like a sophomore and I was a freshman. This was about 1961 or so. But we all knew about the mighty 850 WKIX, and we all wanted to work there. So at any rate, I got up the courage one time to go over to KIX and talk to the program director, who at the time was Bob DeBardelaben, known as Bob Kelly. He was a really dapper guy, you know, he was always wearing a blue blazer, and he was just Mr. Proper and everything, and he did all the programming and hiring for Hugh Holder, the manager. So I BS'd him into saying, "Oh, I've been in radio since I was 15. You know, I started in Salisbury, North Carolina. You know, I went to WSSB in Durham, but I'd love to move up to KIX." He said, "Well, we might have something. Go do me an audition." So I did this audition, and he said, "Okay, we've got something on Sunday afternoons. Can you work Sunday afternoons?" "Yes, absolutely. Starting this Sunday afternoon, 3 days from now." "Yes, I'll be here. Be here at noon. You'll work from noon till 6. And oh, by the way, at 3 o'clock you play a religious tape." But I didn't know the John Tesh story about cutting it. So at any rate, he says, "Okay, you're hired." And he said, "Let me introduce you to our general manager, Hugh Holder." So he walked me into that little office that Mr. Holder had behind the glass door there, and he stood up, and he always would do his hair like that. He was just so proper. And so Bob DeBardelaben said, "This is Gary Edens. He's going to be doing Sunday afternoons for us." And Mr. Holder stuck out his hand and said, "I shall be listening assiduously." I went to Carolina and everything. I didn't do that well in English, but I didn't know what assiduously meant, but I later did. So Bob Kelly wanted me to be Bill Bailey. He said, because he had a jingle named Bill Bailey. I said, "Well, if it's all just the same, I'll just use my real name and not have a jingle." He said, "Okay, but most everybody else here has a jingle." Well, we know that because Jim McCrudden became the second Bob Kelly. He used the copyrighted name Bob Kelly. So at any rate, I one day asked Mr. Holder, I said, "Would it be possible for me to get a jingle with my name in it?" And he said, "Well, it'd be possible. Well, you keep doing a good job and maybe we'll get you one." So eventually, got a jingle. It cost $125, but that was big.
It's the Gary Edens Show.
But I admired Hugh Holder. Remember, he was the guy who was a CBS radio announcer. He didn't know anything about Top 40. In fact, he didn't even like the music. But he was smart enough to know, this is really the coming thing. And then to put it on AM and FM, that was monstrous. But I kind of like jingles, and so did Hugh Holder. So I said, these jingles that they have on WABC in New York, 77 WABC, we need that kind of stuff. He said, "Yeah, well, they're kind of expensive, aren't they?" He said, "Yeah, but, they can really make them good." He said, "Okay, you can get it." So I flew to Dallas. He paid me to go to Dallas, and we came up with all these jingles, and that became the WKIX logo. WKIX, Channel 85, and kept that for years. But I really admired Hugh Holder, and sorry he's at the great radio station in the sky. And Bob DeBardelaben. I kept in touch with him, and of course, you worked with him, but he went on to be a legend. A couple of other guys who passed on, I don't have long stories about them, but Frank Maruca hired a guy from Detroit to be a news guy. His name was J. Paul McGonigle. Oh. Well, Bob Jones, who was my boss at Southern when I was running KOI in Phoenix, said, "Gary, we need a news director out there that, knows our way of doing things. And we got a fella in there in Raleigh, Paul McGonigle. You ought to give him a listen," which meant, "I want you to hire him." So I did, and he was our news director for years. And so here we were, this sort of chicken rock station, and we won all these news awards thanks to J. Paul McGonigle. He dropped the J. We said, can we just call you Paul? And a moving story about him was, he was the news director and department head, and every Wednesday we'd have a department head meeting, and I was the GM, and he wasn't at the meeting, and so it was about 10 after 9, and the meeting started at 9, and I had my secretary call him and said, "Where's Paul?" So at any rate, he never answered. Eventually he called about 9:30. He said, "I got to speak to Gary." "Well, I'm sorry, he's in the department head meeting, the one you're supposed to be in. I can't come, but I need to talk to him." So I got on, I said, "Excuse me." So I talked to him, and he said, "Gary, could you come to my house? I really need your help." And I said, "Sure, I'll be right there." So I went out to his house, and he said, "I'm a hopeless drunk, and I want you to take me to St. Luke's Rehabilitation Center. I need to go in. I'm a hopeless alcoholic." So I did. I took him there, and so he was there for 4 weeks, the same place Dick Van Dyke went, and he was cured. He never drank again in the rest of his life, and he also sponsored a lot of people in AA. So that's my memory of J. Paul McGonigle. He later died of cancer, but he didn't take any drinks. And then the other guy that I have very fond memories of, and he didn't die that long ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and he was a newsman, Raymond Caulder.
Yes.
He was the snappiest dresser. Oh my gosh. He spent all of his money on Gucci loafers and all these fancy clothes, and he was good looking, and he was just smooth. And he kept in touch with us, and he was a member of Walter's WKIX Alumni Group, and he would write funny stuff, but he passed away about, I don't know, 2 years ago. But I talked to him for about an hour one day, and he just was a great guy. So those are some of the WKIX alums who passed on that I remember very fondly.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Such an honor to be with you.